Hello, my name is Andrew, and my presentation is based on my sociology honors project. As you may or may not have heard of the term, the culture of poverty is a term coined by Oscar Lewis in 1961 in his anthropological paper discussing a culture's role when it comes to poverty. Before his insight, people tended to think inside the bubble where poverty was more of an individual matter. In other words, in any discussions to overcome or analyze poverty, one's individual life was the sole determinant to consider. Yet, a consensus was not ever reached as to why a vast number of houses experienced continuing poverty back then. However, Oscar's study of Puerto Ricans in both Puerto Rico and New York suggested one's culture, or one's subculture, so to speak, as a factor of lingering poverty. According to Oscar's paper, he hoped the concept of the culture of poverty may help to correct misapprehensions that have ascribed some behavior patterns of ethnic, national, or regional groups as distinctive characteristics. By distinctive characteristics, according to a book, Sociological Perspective, he meant some 70 characteristics of the poor that can be grouped into 4 clusters. Characteristics on the individual level, the family level, the local community level, and the level of the relationship between members of the subculture and the larger culture. Larger society. With a wide list of categories, regardless of disciplines, many scholars relied on the concept. Not too soon, however, a social issue occurred. Despite Lewis' initial hope with regards to the concept of his own, the culture of poverty, misapprehensions about the poor only got intensified through the concept. People now think the poor could not get out of their circumstances, even if they were aided by the government or by other means, simply because their poor traits would get in their ways. Furthermore, people began to blame the victims for not escaping their bleak situations, even when they have the ability to escape. Contemporary scholars found this phenomenon so problematic that they decided to get together evidence that could refute the concept of the culture of poverty. According to the book, A Sociological Perspective, there was a governmental initiative in 1997 in Israel called Project RENEWAL. It was aimed at improving the standard of living of neighborhood residents and providing them, and especially their children, with better life chances. With the concept of the culture of poverty in mind, the poor in Israel should not have improved their lives with the supply, because their poor traits would have prevented them from improving their conditions. However, the results suggested otherwise. It reads, no significant association was found among the individual, familial, and communal levels, but all 3 correlations with the societal level are relatively high, with 2 being statistically significant. This last finding may suggest further hypotheses about the impact of having the poverty traits, but it does not change the general conclusion that even though our population was very poor, was the second generation of poverty, and showed many poverty traits, Lewis' model of the culture of poverty was not supported. Furthermore, they found out that the correlation between welfare dependency and demandingness was insignificant, and the poor in Israel was found to be aware of middle-class norms and tended to express their conformity with them rather than dependency and demandingness. This suggests that not only the concept of the culture of poverty was not applicable to those involved in Project RENEWAL, but the poor traits like welfare dependency were not necessarily contributing to the continuity of poverty, and the poor were rather eager to get out of their circumstances. In addition to the discovery from Project RENEWAL, there has been plenty of experimental results that did not support the concept of the culture of poverty and debunked such myths about the poor. For example, a myth that poor people are unmotivated and have weak work ethics was rejected by Iverson and Farber's study that suggested a number of poor people were, in fact, engrossed with a multitude of jobs to make a living. Also, a myth that poor parents are uninvolved in their children's learning, largely because they do not value education, was refuted by a set of experimental results by Laura and Leacher, suggesting low-income parents are less likely to attend school functions or volunteer in their children's classrooms, not because they care less about education, but because they have less access to school involvement than their wealthier peers. With those in mind, it's fairly arguable that Lewis' interpretation on the continuity of poverty might not be entirely true, although still a number of researchers support the idea of the culture of poverty. Then, how are we supposed to interpret this social issue? James Patterson made us remark that structural causes of lingering poverty must as well be recognized. It reads, most poverty can be traced back to structural factors inherent to either the economy and or to several interrelated institutional environments that serve to favor certain groups over others, generally based on gender, race, or class. For example, according to Gregory Jordan from Arizona State University, the disproportionately high rate of poverty among women may be viewed as the consequence of the patriarchal society that continues to resist their inclusion in a part of society that has been historically dominated by men. And as a consequence, welfare programs have been designed in ways that stigmatize public support for women as opposed to marital support. Considering all of the logical threats made above, it is still hard to cite on either one rejecting the existence of the culture of poverty and the other accepting the culture of poverty as the major determinant of continuing poverty, because it seems to me clearly that the culture of poverty exists, yet it is less of a major determinant and more of just one of the determinants. Also, I identified that there has been no empirical data drawn through an experiment on a national level or on a global level, meaning that the culture of poverty and the rejection of the culture of poverty are not both entirely proven. Therefore, I believe it is important to raise our awareness and attention towards the culture of poverty, and the following research that measures the poor with a broader scale must be precedented before saying the culture of poverty is either real or not real. Besides, without such significant evidence, the culture of blaming the victims will endure to exist and make the poor suffer even more. So, it is important in either of ways that questioning how poverty that is so widespread in the world can endure and reasoning with it is the only key to resolving this social issue. Thank you.